So, it is the 4th of April, 2018. My name's Doswell. I'm with Nathan Kosmicki. Thank you for doing an interview with me as a native Nebraskan.
Absolutely.
And let's do this. So, Nathan, when and where were you born?
I was born October 15th, 1993 in Grand Island, Nebraska.
And what are your parents' names?
Jim and Amy Kosmicki.
And what were or are their occupations?
My father is he's an English instructor at Central Community College in Grand Island, and my mother has had a series of jobs, but in general she works with the mentally disabled. She's worked for Mid-Nebraska Individual Services. She has worked for Health and Human Services with the state. Currently she works for ILC, which is Integrated Life Choices, which is another service provider. So.
And how many siblings do you have?
I have a single brother who's younger than me.
What's his name?
Elliot.
And what does he do?
Elliot currently lives in Lincoln, Nebraska with his wife, Alana, and he works at Hy-Vee in customer service.
So your family's entirely from Nebraska. So how did your family come to reside in Nebraska?
To be completely honest, I'm not exactly sure. I know that my grandfather's family on my dad's side owns today, like to date, a farm near North Platte, which is where most of the family originates from on the Kosmicki side. And then on my mother's side, they own farmland up near Madison, Humphrey, Norfolk area, which is northeastern Nebraska.
So does any significance hold Nebraska within your family's tradition and culture? Do they feel like Nebraskans?
I would say, even to date, both of my parents feel like a sort of sense of pride and Nebraska-ness to them. I would say yes. Like they by and large, they consider themselves Nebraska fans, if not just based on their reverence for Nebraska Husker football. So.
There's a big thing here.
Yeah.
So, this is a hard question, but what was your earliest memory? Can you think of anything that when you were very young, anything stick out to you?
Earliest memory. Oh shit. Earliest memory. I do. Probably going to my Grandma Kosmicki. They had a house on 4th Street in Grand Island. And I remember going over there because my grandpa and grandma had this tiny little annoying dog named Tiffy.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that's probably it. But
yeah. So then, obviously, you grew up in Grand Island. But what activities did you participate in? Activities as a child?
As a child, so I did swim lessons. So it's just basically teaching kids how to swim, and I did that throughout. I don't honestly know when I stopped, but it worked. I can swim, so. But I tried Pee-wee soccer and gave up on that. It didn't stick, and then in elementary and middle school, I think the only real thing I did was band. I was part of the band. So.
Okay, so transitioning from childhood towards young adulthood and eventually adulthood, did anything really stick out to you that's happened, like really big things?
Really big things.
From that sort of age, from your Pee-wee soccer age to before college. Like
locally, personally, nationally?
You, just anything that stuck out to you in your time as becoming an adult sort of thing.
When I was in middle school, as far as local politics and sort of the general beginning of sort of understanding the world, there's a meat packing plant in Grand Island.
Okay.
It was Monfort's, now it's JBS Swift, whatever, names changed. Mm-hmm. There was an ICE raid
Okay.
and a lot of members of the community were taken, were arrested, and eventually deported. And I remember there was an actual march in Grand Island that was organized about immigrants' rights and just sort of addressing the issues with immigration within the United States, and that was in my hometown. Like there were kids in high school at that time who were allowed out of high school to participate in that march because they knew people who had been affected by that raid.
And at the time, how did you feel about that sort of situation?
I mean, so I preface to all of this, you should probably figure by my parents' occupations that they're fairly liberal leaning, and so my parents were obviously very, very liberal, very left in how they responded to it. But I went to a Lutheran elementary and middle school, so I was surrounded by a lot of people who saw the entire thing as the entire idea of marching and demanding these sort of rights, or not even demanding, just asking for recognition of these rights. Just saw them as whiny people who just should be happy with what they have.
And did that stick with you?
To date, yes.
Yes, yeah, okay. So how would you compare your family's experience of an estate? Do you feel like that shaped them? If you lived, this is a very conjecture question, but if you lived anywhere else, do you think you'd still be the same? Your family and you? Do you think if you lived anywhere else in the country?
Not necessarily, because I think growing up in a red state, being a very blue individual from a blue family, has kind of, I don't know, solidified where I stand. If I were to have grown up in Seattle or Massachusetts, or just sort of like a liberal bastion of the United States, I feel like my opinions would not be as solid as they are. Like it would have just been what I sort of fed off of from everyone around me. Whereas this, I don't know. I've always had to prove what I believe out here. It's not just assumed and the status quo. I've always had to know this is what I believe and this is why I believe it. And I feel like it's I don't want to say it's made me better, because fuck hierarchy or anything like that, but it's definitely, I would be a different individual if I had grown up somewhere else.
Okay. So as moving into adult life now, do you think your college experience that you had, you were at Hastings College, weren't you?
And CCC, yes.
And CCC, was that unique to Nebraska, and how so, do you think?
This is interesting, because my college experience, like I said, was broken up into two completely different segments. I went to a community college in my hometown for my first 2 years of college, and that was completely that in and of itself, that was a unique experience. I don't know if I could say it was uniquely Nebraskan, because I don't know. Well, again, I can't really say that because I didn't go to community college anywhere else, so I really have nothing to compare it to. But it was much different from my experience at Hastings College. Like, going to a class and at least half of the class being comprised of single mothers who are working full-time and still taking classes, that's completely different to anything I'm going to get at Hastings College. Like, it's, working with a lot of vets. Like, the community college in Grand Island has a lot of veterans who start their college career after serving. They started out at community college. And it's a completely different dynamic than going to Hastings. Hastings was fantastic. Like, especially for what I wanted to do.
Which
I
was
so when I started out at CCC, I wanted to do IT. I wanted to do information technology, computers, and just be like the sad-looking dude with glasses in the corner who you call when your computer doesn't work. Like that's what I wanted to do.
okay.
And switched from that because it's cold and not interesting. I can do the work, but it's not interesting. And I had always had an interest in history, so I switched to academic transfer being my major, quote unquote, at CCC, and then I became a history major at Hastings College, and the department is fantastic. The teachers who I worked with were fantastic, and I think that actually might be the thing that Nebraska has going for it, at least in greater Nebraska, is this idea of small class sizes and teachers knowing who you are. Obviously, you have a metropolitan area in Nebraska, that being Omaha, where you have larger class sizes and you have larger schools, UNL, UNO, you have massive lecture halls where the teacher has no fucking clue who you are. But I do think, at least growing up out here, you know people, you get to know them, and that's I don't know. I don't know if that's a uniquely Nebraska thing or if it just has to do with being a rural area.
Still, if it was to you, it was natural.
Yeah.
So, transitioning into adulthood, throughout your college experience and afterwards, what have you noticed most about Hastings, the city or the town? I don't know how you define it, but what have you noticed most about that when you transitioned into? Is there anything that sticks out to you?
Hastings as a town, well, especially coming from Grand Island, because I grew up in Grand Island, Hastings as a city, as a town, what have you, is much more of a community. There's more of an idea of what Hastings is. My entire time growing up in Grand Island was a big town that really just wanted to operate as a small town still, and just kind of continually ignored all of the things that the city needed. It's as far as the Tri-Cities go, it is the largest of the Tri-Cities, and for the longest time, it was just you had a city council and you had mayors that wanted to treat it like a small town still, refused to acknowledge any sort of issues that come up with being a larger population, and Hastings is in tune with itself. There is a community here. There are people here who want to make a community and maintain a community. And that's, I don't know, I think that's the biggest thing I've noticed being an adult transitioning down here. As far as being an adult transitioning within Nebraska, just growing up here in both Grand Island and Hastings, being an adult is the transition from adolescence to adult is a lot of things, but being myself, someone who's always been interested in politics, and just it's been disheartening at the least. It's just, I Pete Ricketts, the current governor, waste of space, has maybe he does actually think he's acting in the interest of his constituency, but in all actuality is fucking over his constituency constantly in favor of his own personal gains. So,
okay,
right. I don't know if that was tangential or not. That probably was, but
nothing is tangential. It's about Nebraska. You're right on point. So, from your working in college experiences and also from your growing up experiences, would you say Nebraskans, as people you know from your local community and also at college, do they have defining features that identify just as Nebraskans? You as one.
So there is, and it's actually been talked about as being the motto, or not even the motto, the slogan for the tourism board for Nebraska, but it's Nebraska nice.
Yeah.
Which I can, to certain extents, I can agree with. There is a politeness and kindness to most Nebraskans that's kind of instilled. Like, but, as I've said, I don't know if that's necessarily tied to Nebraska, because I think it might just be tied to rural bits. Like, I've been a month ago, I was in North Carolina, and the rural bits of North Carolina, a completely different state in a completely different time zone, on like literally everything is different. But you go to the rural bits of the country of that state, and they're kind, they're courteous, they will help you. They will I honestly think it just has to do with being a low population area.
So you think maybe there's more of a rural identity than there is a state identity? And would you say so for this part of the world, in Nebraska, would you say it was more had a rural identity rather than a state identity?
This bit completely.
Particularly Hastings and Grand Island.
The thing is I think people would say that this is part of, like I said, it's Nebraska nice. But I can almost guarantee that you end up in rural Kansas, they're going to act pretty much the same. You end up in rural South Dakota, I can say they're going to act pretty much the same. Rural North Dakota, they're going to act pretty much the same. Rural Colorado, like it's. I think it's not. There are bits of Nebraska identity. Mostly they're tied to the Cornhuskers. Like that's that. And apparently chili and cinnamon rolls, I guess.
Okay.
I guess that's a Nebraska thing.
Really?
Yeah, it's when you eat chili, you have cinnamon rolls with it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's bizarre.
Yeah. So but I don't know. It's there is probably a Nebraska identity out there, but as far as I can tell, most of the bits that people latch onto, I can find in other places.
Okay. No. So considering who you went to school with from early school and also college, and maybe even people you work with, have many people stayed in the state? And if they didn't, did people display like a sort of an interest in leaving the state at any point, or is it a common thing?
Oh my God! So literally everyone growing up doesn't want to be here.
Okay.
But again, that's probably tied to adolescence and just being a shithead when you're in middle school. But if I had to be honest, most of the people I know are still around. I know several. Basically, the way it works is everyone, in my experience, goes to school in state. They go to Lincoln, they go to Omaha, they go to where have you, Hastings, Chadron State, or where what have you. They all go to school within the state, and then I know personally of maybe a half dozen people I know growing up who growing up, not from college, but just growing up from like high school. I know maybe a half dozen people who have left the state. So everyone talks about leaving the state, but things keep them here. And there are many things to keep you here. You have family, low cost of living. It is insanely... It's just cheap to live here. Like this place is $400 a month. Like you could not get that anywhere else. Like, and houses are cheap here, and wages are fairly stable. Like if not higher, they passed a minimum wage hike a couple years ago, and thank God for it. But it's a fairly not even fairly. It's an exceptionally livable state apart from the weather. So most people end up staying, but everyone talks about leaving.
So when you were growing up, did you talk about leaving, and do you have still any intent to do so?
Oh, I have every intent of leaving, honestly, within the year. But I've waxed and waned on it. Like, when I was young, When I was young, I had no idea. Like Lincoln or Omaha was enough growing up. Like if I ended up there,
You'd be happy.
I'd be happy. And then I started to travel, started to be other places, and it's I've determined that for myself I need to leave.
And
So.
you got any place in mind if you were to leave? Still within the United States?
Still within the United States, yeah.
Do you have any idea of where you'd want to go?
I've considered several places. I mean, I'm mostly looking at graduate school. And as far as graduate school is concerned, I'm looking at Louisiana, like New Orleans, the University of New Orleans. University of North Carolina, Greensboro. I've been to North Carolina several times. It's a beautiful state with a lot of stuff to do, and North Carolina would be fantastic. I've been to West Virginia, and to be completely honest, I really enjoyed it. So, I've just I'm weighing my options. I can literally go anywhere. So.
No, that makes sense. So, if you had to describe some of your favourite or least favourite aspects of we'll do it either side. So, some of your favourite aspects of Nebraska, or living in Nebraska. Are there what are the things that stick out to you while you've been in?
Aspects.
Just things that strike out to you that you enjoy about being here.
That's another thing that you'll hear people talking about is Nebraska sunsets and Nebraska sunrises.
Okay.
And I'm gonna be completely honest, they're fantastic. Like they're amazing. I do enjoy summers here. A lot of people hate how humid it is here, but that's because they haven't been other places. Like it's
very humid.
It is much worse in Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. It is much worse, but I absolutely love summers here. The crane migration, I absolutely it's going on currently. It's getting towards the end of it, but the migration of the sandhill cranes is fantastic. The sandhills themselves, like I've had the I don't know. I have been cursed with living in probably the least interesting part of this state because southeastern Nebraska is gorgeous. Hills, trees, green. It's amazing. You go up to the northeast bit and it's the same way. The sand hills to the west, like it's a beautiful state landscape wise. I just happen to be in the flat lands.
And so you think so the bit you're in, you feel it's not necessarily attractive to you.
It's not necessarily like there's beauty everywhere, and I can appreciate it everywhere, but it's
desolate.
It is like there's just there. I mean, we're in the middle of a town of 25,000 people. If I drive for 15 minutes, I could be surrounded by nothing.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I get you.
Like that's and not even like trees. Like literally nothing. Like just the road, my car, and nothing around me.
Yeah. No, I see. So, could you describe, or do you think there have been any experiences you've lived throughout your life that are unique to Nebraska?
That, like
the desolate,
like the desolate bits. I'd imagine that tubing is a big thing other places, but like tubing down a shallow river and getting stuck on a sandbank is kind of is kind of grown up. My Nebraska thing where you have to walk for most of a tubing trip. Like I said, chili cinnamon rolls.
Your answer can also be no. You can feel that there are no unique experiences.
Well, unique to Nebraska.
That you've lived?
I mean, it's something that always stands out to me, and I'm certain that it probably happens other places. But one of the things that's always been like a point of pride, or something that I always reference when talking about my hometown, Faith United Methodist Church went under. Like, not it didn't go under, but they sold the church.
Okay.
It was in a bad way. They merged with another church in Grand Island. Happened so that the people who bought that church, they were a group of Laotian and Vietnamese immigrants.
Okay.
It is now a Buddhist temple.
Okay.
Like, it is still that same church. It just has two very brightly painted statues out in front of it, which are a Buddhist. I don't know who they are, but they're Buddhist. And on the weekends, there's a taco truck that sets up in the parking lot.
And that you think that's unique, and also you enjoy that.
I fucking love that. Like, it's amazing. But that's, I suppose that has to be unique, and that has to do with just the influx of immigrants in the area. There are a lot of Laotian people in Grand Island, a lot of Vietnamese, and a lot of Hispanic, like Guatemalan, Mexican, El Salvadorian, and it mostly has to do with the meatpacking plants and what jobs they can get around the area. But
naturally,
but that's fantastic. I can get amazing tacos in Grand Island.
It's a point of pride for you.
Yeah.
So, would you say beforehand you had any idea of a career in your mind at all, or has there ever been a particular path you thought you would choose?
Growing up, it never existed outside of Nebraska. Like, getting out was moving to Lincoln or Omaha. That was getting away. Like, gonna get the fuck out of Grand Island. Growing up, I never really had a specific career in mind. I don't know. I was occupied with other shit. It was either Pokemon or, friends or whatnot. Like, I didn't really. If I had to tell people what I wanted to be when I grew up, it was either a teacher, or when I got more into high school, like I had said previously, IT, computer stuff. I never really gave much thought into like programming or like software design or anything like that, because that's a shitload of math, and I've never been good at math. But when I was growing up, it was always within Nebraska, and like I said, Lincoln or Omaha was getting out. That changed. Honestly, it changed when I started college at Hastings is when that really changed, because I met a lot of people who didn't grow up here and talked about going other places. Like, as far as like the friend group I made at Hastings College, I have a passport and I've never used it. I've never been out of the country, and that I am the odd man out for having never been out of the country, let alone had limited experiences outside of this state. So
do you have intention of leaving the country?
Not. I mean, on holiday, like going on vacations and whatnot.
Particularly, it doesn't appeal to you to live anywhere else.
I've never been anywhere. Like, to date, I've never used my passport, so I can't really speak for that. Obviously, if shit, not to say that shit hasn't hit the fan, but if shit hits the fan in a major way here, I would not rule it out. Like, there are other places I could live, most definitely, but I've never really considered living somewhere else, like living in a different country. So,
well, this is a bit of a left field question, but how would you describe the concept of identity, maybe locally and nationally? Like, do you have a concept of identity?
Personally, or
just what would you think of makes identity? Not necessarily to you, but just the concept of identity.
Well, the concept of identity is, I guess, where you've been, who you think you are, and who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's an odd thing that I've put thought into, but never much thought into, because I have an idea of who I am personally, but I don't know if I can lump that into anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if I can wholeheartedly say that I'm a Nebraskan, because obviously I'm a registered Nebraska voter and a Nebraska resident, so by that definition, yes, I am a Nebraskan, but like, as far as the overarching idea of what Nebraska is and what Nebraska stands for, I don't know if I could actually say I was one.
Okay. So do you think you, and even just people you know, their concept of identity is shaped by being in Nebraska? Do you think people here have a different concept of what identity means?
To an extent, yes. Like I said, there are bits of Nebraska that people... Like I said, there are bits of Nebraska that people latch onto and think are inherently unique to Nebraska. Like I said, the big one, and everyone from Nebraska will say that like Nebraskans are nice. Like they're nice people, they're courteous, they're kind, they will help you. But I've seen that other places too. So I don't know if that's inherently Nebraskan. I don't want to take it away from Nebraska because that's a good thing. But I don't know if it's inherently a Nebraska thing to be nice and kind to people. So.
Okay. Nice. So, would you consider yourself, first and foremost, an American or a Nebraskan?
American.
Okay. And what do you think it means to be an American in terms of identity?
Oh fuck. Again, I don't know. I just know that as an American, I don't know. It just feels like I have more options when I call myself an American.
Do you think that people from Nebraska that consider themselves an American would consider themselves a different type of American than someone that lived, say, on the coast?
Perhaps, yes. Actually, entirely yes. Because there's just different things that affect your idea. Like, so I grew up in Nebraska. The word union here, this is just my example that I'm going to give. The word union here is a dirty word.
Yep.
Even though we have the word co-op everywhere, which is it's a fucking union.
Yep.
It's just not called a union. But whatever. I went to West Virginia. West Virginia is a completely different state, a completely different ballgame. Union is not a dirty word there. Union is actually a point of pride and strength. So, if someone who considers themselves an American from Nebraska, I don't know. There's not enough substantial difference here for me to be like, I am a Nebraskan. Like, I feel like, and I have noticed when I go places as a Nebraskan, it's not too much of a transition. It's not too much of a difference.
So overall, you're just sort of Americans.
Yeah.
Rather than being a distinctive type of American.
Yeah. And I mean, that, like, even to date, like there's a lot of people who recruit heavily from the Midwest for actors because they don't have an accent. Like, there's not distinguishable differences between Nebraskans and most of America.
Now this is conjecture here, but do you think for people that live in certain types of America, say on the coast, do you think they would call themselves, say, New Yorkers or Bostonians before they call themselves Americans?
Completely, and I think that has to do with the fact that there are major differences between New York City and literally everywhere else in the country.
Okay.
There are major differences between Boston and literally everywhere else in the country. If I were to take Hastings, Nebraska, or Grand Island, Nebraska, and plop it in the middle of Kansas or plop it in the middle of South Dakota, it would function pretty much the exact same way. Or even to plop it in the middle of, like, Missouri or something like that. Like, it would function relatively the same.
Okay.
Like, it's a rural town. Like, it's a town, don't get me wrong, a town of substantial size. This is 24,000 people. Grand Island is 50,000 people. So it's it's a significant sized town, but if you plop it in the middle of a rural area with no major metropolitan center anywhere near it, it's going to operate relatively same.
So, do you think that, say, the Midwest towns, I'm assuming that these are sort of Midwest places?
Yeah.
Would you say Midwest is just Americans, and New Yorkers are New Yorkers, and people from Los Angeles are Californians?
I would say that, and I think that you can find evidence of that. Like, it's reflected in how they vote.
Mm-hmm.
Like L.A., left, blue. New York, blue. Boston, blue. These are different people to what most people around here consider themselves. These aren't Americans. These are New Yorkers. These are Bostonians. These are people from Los Angeles. These are people from Seattle. These are people, like, they're not us. They're different.
And do you think there's a prevailing attitude within local Nebraska communities against these sort of people? Do you think they feel they are different than, say, coasters?
Oh, completely.
Yeah?
Yeah. Completely. I mean,
But do you think there's any unique qualities that Nebraskans share?
Unique qualities.
Attributes, perhaps.
I mean,
It could be negative.
an ability to withstand the cold.
Yeah.
Like, anyone who has lived here for a significant amount of time can deal with it being, negative 25 degrees, and that's not even an exaggeration.
No.
Like, it's so that and this may be ingrained in me, but I do think Nebraskans are better drivers than any neighboring state. Like,
okay.
Coloradans can't drive worth shit, and neither can people from Iowa. So,
Okay.
but there's a lot of shit Nebraska drivers, but like, by and large, I feel like we're better drivers. So yeah.
I know you said Nebraska you feel is different, or the Midwestern states are different than the ones on the coast. Do you think there's an animosity within Midwestern states separately? So, like, you versus Kansans or you versus
Oh,
Iowa?
completely, man. Like I said, there's literally no difference. Like, you cannot notice a difference between Iowa and Kansas from Nebraska, but, like, fuck Iowa and fuck Kansas.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
it is ingrained in me. Like, that's probably something that will never go away. So
It's like local animosity, sort of thing.
yeah, completely.
Okay, no, I see that. But this is, again, a very broad question. Forget about the Midwest, but what does it mean to maybe be a Nebraskan? If you don't even feel it, what would you think would be what it means to be a Nebraskan?
The general overarching idea of what it means to be a Nebraskan. Oh, man, just... There is a strong sense of, like, this idea, which is not unique to Nebraska, but just like working hard and you will get yours.
Mm-hmm.
There's that idea throughout.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was raised with that. Like, I was raised with that with my parents being who they are. Like, left-leaning liberal people is like, you get yours because you work hard for it.
Yeah.
Like, and the bad and nothing but respect for that mentality. Like, there's nothing wrong with hard work, but like the way that that's been interpreted, that like nobody deserves a hand up.
Okay.
Like it has that's what it's mutated into. Like, and it that, and then coming together, helping each other, like helping your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
Someone needs help, you lend a hand. That's prevalent throughout, even in Lincoln, Omaha, major metropolitan areas. Just people coming together and helping each other is a thing. Potlucks.
Okay.
A lot of potlucks.
Share.
Church. Especially in rural Nebraska. Not even especially, like throughout this entire state, even in Lincoln and Omaha. Church.
And do you think that bleeds through? I mean, has it affected you, church?
I mean, I grew up religious. Like, my folks took us to church. I went to a Methodist church. Like I said, I had a very odd youth because I went to a Lutheran elementary and middle school, but I was raised a Methodist.
Okay.
Which meant that I was continually having to explain that being a Methodist did not mean I was not Christian. But, so that I grew up, like, having faith. I fell out middle school, 7th grade is when I kind of gave up on it. But I did grow up in faith, and I think most everyone in this state grew up in faith. And
do you think most people in the state, so you may have fell out, but do you feel like most people around you stuck with it? Do you think it rang true with them?
Do
you feel like it's a very Christianized state?
It is, through and through. Like, to date, you have the current governor, Pete Ricketts, like, stating, as governor of this state, that Nebraska is a pro-life state.
Okay.
I don't know where he's getting that from, because I'm pro-choice, and I know a lot of people in the state who are pro-choice, but he said it, and he's going to say it again. Like, he's got the backing to be able to say that sort of shit.
And with him in particular, do you feel like he, as much as he may be the elected representative of Nebraska, does he speak for Nebraskans?
If you ask me, which you are, no.
Yes,
because if I'm going to be completely honest, I don't consider the bald-headed bastard a Nebraskan. Mm-hmm. He grew up in Chicago. His family's money is in Chicago. He may be from Nebraska, but he was educated, and like he's from Chicago, man. Like, he's, for fuck's sake, he refuses to live in the governor's mansion in Lincoln, Nebraska. Yeah. He still lives in his home in Omaha, and is driven to and escorted by state patrol into Lincoln every fucking day. Costs taxpayers money, by the way, because that's gas and state patrol spending. But he's not a fucking Nebraskan. He speaks for himself and his interests, and somehow is able to convince everyone that it's in the best interest of everyone.
So from your opinion, why is it he gets re-elected?
He's a Republican.
That's so... Okay.
He's a Republican, and he is pro-life, even though he's for the death penalty and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money on lethal injection drugs. He's pro-life, and he's a Republican.
And you think being a Republican is more important than the policies in this state?
At some point, it became that way.
Okay.
When I was growing up, wasn't. We had several Democratic governors. It did not matter what your party affiliation was. People voted on the politician.
Oh, okay.
They voted on the guy and what he was saying. They didn't give a fuck about what party he was. Mm-hmm. We had Bob Kerrey, which was a little bit, as governor, a little bit before I was born. Mm-hmm. And then we had Ben Nelson when I was actually alive. Both Democrats, both went on to be senators for the state. Both Democrats their entire career. And that people voted them in. It did not matter what your party affiliation was. It mattered what you were talking about, if you were going to be good for this state, and it didn't matter beyond that. Like I said, it was reasonable voting. Like, reasonable voting by reasonable voters, and something happened. And now voting for Donald Trump was completely against the interest of literally everyone in this state. Because the man was vehemently against NAFTA and vehemently against TPP. Both of which would have benefited this entire fucking state. Because, not even benefited, benefits, because he was talking about getting rid of NAFTA.
Mm-hmm.
NAFTA benefits us every single day, and TPP would have benefited this state more, because we make combines, we make corn, we make soybeans, and we would have been able to sell more of them to the East, to China, to Korea, to what have you.
So you bring up Trump and you bring up the issues. Why do you think they then voted? Because this state voted for Trump, didn't it?
Yeah. By and large.
Why do you think that happened? If it wasn't in their interest, okay.
It was a response to 8 years of Obama. Obama was not well liked in this state. Don't know why. Actually, I do know why. I'm going to be just frank. He's black. But, he's black and he was a Democrat. Misinformation. And the fact that the Dems decided to run Hillary. They decided to run a Clinton.
Do you think it was because she was a Clinton or a woman? Do you think
both?
Do you think that both impacts in this state?
Both. You have no idea.
I'm going to digress a little bit, but as a woman, do you think that women in politics would be a thing for this state? Would it?
Well, so it's odd because one of our current senators, Deb Fischer, is a woman,
what I was thinking.
And we have female state senators, but just being here through the election cycle, you have no idea how many times I would hear, do you really want a woman to be president? 1 week, 1 week out of every month, she's going to be menstruating. She's not going to be able to think straight. And I had to look him dead in the face, and I'm like, is this seriously your fucking concern? Also, never mind the fact that Hillary Clinton is well beyond menstruation.
Yeah. Well beyond.
But it's serious consideration here.
That was their point.
Yeah. And also, I will, when I die, I will probably have the fucking emails tattooed across my chest. But the fucking emails.
Okay.
I feel like a lot of shit got misconstrued in this election, and a lot of bullshit got a lot of play, and a lot of serious shit was downplayed.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people were misinformed with this last election cycle, and it just really fucked them. And to be completely fair to the people of this state, they have come forward saying, the corn board or something like that in Nebraska has been actually, NAFTA's good for us. Actually, we're really nervous about these trade tariffs. We're this is bad for us.
So their money comes from.
Yeah, so they're actually coming forward and saying that this is bad, but I guarantee if you asked any of them if they would change their vote in 2016, they wouldn't.
Do you think in 2020, let's say it was a man that ran against her, and I couldn't even imagine who ran, but let's say a Democrat man ran against Trump on the gaze that he would keep NAFTA and etc. How do you think they'd vote?
In 2020?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it'd be a Democratic swing, man.
You think?
Yeah. Especially if it's a good-looking white man. Like I said, America's got some deep-seated hatred a lot deep-seated hatred for anyone of color and deep-seated hatred towards towards women. And I voted for Hillary Clinton, but it was a ballsy move to play a woman immediately following the first black president.
Yeah.
Like it as fucked as that is to say, because it shouldn't be a fucking issue. But here it is. Like it was. I grew up with just vehement hatred towards Barack Obama, even though that man did nothing but good domestic policy.
Do you think the issue of a black president and a woman is an issue nationwide, or do you think it sticks out more here than it would do in another state?
It's nationwide, but it does stick out here because this is a rural conservative state, just like it sticks out in Mississippi, or it sticks out in Alabama, or it sticks out, like, if it is a predominantly agrarian rural state, you're going to have a massive amount of conservatism for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Like I've always blamed religion because for whatever reason the wonderful message of Christ somehow gets construed into greed, hate, and fear mongering. But I've always tied it to religion because rural parts of the country are always more religious than more metropolitan areas.
What do you think Nebraska has to offer to young people? Do you think?
Like I said earlier, it's cheap. Cheap living, cheap property. Apparently, property taxes are high comparably. I've never paid property taxes because I've always been a renter.
Of course.
But just even then, like looking around the country, it's cheap property. Like buying an actual house. The houses here in Hastings, you can get a nice old house. If you're getting hosed, you pay $200K for it.
It seems quite nice.
If you're getting hosed, you pay $200K for a nice old house here. If that shit were on the east or the west coast, it'd be $1 million home. Like, it's.
So then, based on your experience, what would you say draws young people in or out of the state? Is there anything that particularly pushes them away or draws them in? Have they done enough to draw people in, or are they doing something? Are they not doing enough that is pushing people away?
Well, the thing is I don't know what they could do. Because literally every incentive that I've seen the state do to try and bring in jobs just fucks over the state, because this state has signed on board with this idea of creating incentives for big businesses to install, to build here. Like, there's going to be a new Facebook data center in Omaha. It's going to use up a massive amount of space, take a massive amount of utilities, and while they're building it, that's thousands of construction jobs. Thousands of construction jobs. But once it's built, there's going to be about 40 employees.
Okay.
So the state has created a massive footprint in the city of Omaha that's going to suck up a fuckload of power and bandwidth for 40 jobs. Like, I don't know the answer to keep young people here. It's like it would be jobs, but as far as it stands, what Nebraska has going for it is, compared to every single state next to it, it has the highest minimum wage and cheap cost of living.
Cheap and cheerful.
Yeah, it's cheap. Like, utilities here are cheap because they're publicly managed, and rent, by and large, is cheap here.
So you say utilities here are publicly managed. Do you think that versus other states is a good thing?
Completely. And it's one of my points of pride for this state, is the fact that all of the power in the state is publicly managed.
And how would you compare that to other states? Would you think that other people in other states where they weren't publicly managed would care?
They wouldn't care.
Would they not notice?
No. I mean, they might notice a price difference, but
they just wouldn't know that it was.
No. It's.
But do you think older family members, or just other family members, or even acquaintances that that are a bit older than you, or even younger than you, do you think they would have a different viewpoint than yourself when it comes to Nebraska and what keeps people here and what makes people go away? Do you think so? Your father's generation, or?
Yeah, there's the older generation. I don't know. There is this idea of just being better about it. Like, I think the best example I can think of, a couple months ago, I was working, and I was chatting with this dude, and he was talking about we were talking about how it was it was fairly mild day for being in the middle of winter. And I was mentioning it because the Northeast has been getting hit by blizzard after blizzard. And then that particular moment, like, New York was under like 6 inches of snow, like, which for New York City is an epidemic. And I mentioned that. I was just like, well, we could, this could be New York where they're like under 6 inches of snow. And he's just like, nah. They just gotta, buck up and deal with it like we do. And, to which my response was, well, actually, like, city services are being shut down, and, like, there's an actual issue of, like, people might starve while they're in New York. And that's, like, it's just this idea that, like, they just need to fucking buck up and deal with it like we do. Like, that's the thing, is Nebraskans are hardy. Like,
and do you think that literally comes from an idea of being here, that Nebraskans will think that everyone else should live as they live, and like if there's a problem, they should live as Nebraskans?
I mean, I've seen it. I mean, even like my grandpa would talk about it. My dad would mention it every now and again. Like, it's just, it's cold, but we deal with it.
It's just, that is life.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I see that. So how do you? I mean, we've touched on politics, but how do you view politics in this state, in general terms?
Fucked. Just fucked. Because, like I said, there are kind, good people here who have good intentions and good ideas about, just about life, like that, but they just continually fuck themselves over at the voting booth. Like, they get hung up on one issue, or they get misconstrued about one thing, and suddenly they completely fuck themselves over. Like, this entire state, not this entire state, because obviously there are people who did not vote for Donald Trump, but the majority of this state voted for Donald Trump because the millionaire bankrupt landlord from New York City is going to represent the interests of central Nebraska best. Also the fucking emails.
Yeah.
Like, it's that and fucking Pete Ricketts. Like, that, he just, it became a party line thing. Like, I'm going to vote Republican because Republicans are going to represent my interests best. Because I'm a registered Republican. Even though, no, like, it is, for the last few years, it's been a campaign of misinformation and hate. Like, it's been, the country is going the wrong way, and we're going to blame it on someone. We're not going to blame it on policy or the people who are actually fucking everything over. We're going to blame it on someone, and that someone being immigrants, being, uppity liberals. We're going to blame it on them. And they buy it. By and large.
So, having said that, being of your political leaning which is left. Have you always been democratically left, or?
Yes. Like I said, my parents both have, my entire life have been registered Democrats. My dad arguably is more blue than I am. My mother's a Democrat. She's never been very politically minded. She's the kindest woman I've ever met, and will just always. She's not a bleeding heart liberal. She's just a bleeding heart human. Like, she will just always feel for anyone.
That's a lovely thing to say.
Yeah, like she'll just feel for everyone. So yes, I've been democratically leaning or liberal leaning.
So being of a left state of mind, what was it like growing up in a state which consistently votes to the right or to red? Yeah,
it's been exhausting. Like I said, it's disheartening at the very least to watch good people fuck themselves over and just say evil. And I don't want to say evil because I don't want to demonize anyone. Just say mean shit. Like, oh man, like people talking like, yeah, fuck food stamps. Why do we need food stamps? And it's like, obviously because people need food. And then they're like, well, why don't they just work harder? Why don't they just work more? And then they can feed themselves. And it's just people saying such callous, mean things, and it just doesn't make sense. And so it's been disheartening. And it was, like I said, I had throughout high school and my entire college career, I had the the Obama administration to at least like, at least things are fine. Like, he's hung on Republican Congress and Senate, but at least the executive is Democratic. That's fine. And the next election is going to go our way. We all see how that fucking went. So it's been disheartening, and yeah.
So the attitudes you say there about people saying horrible, mean things, do you think that's a Republican thing, or do you think locally Nebraskans? And do you think that's because they are Republicans, or do you think that's literally because of the way they're raised in Nebraska? Do you think that's a local thing?
I think it's a Republican thing. Like I said, I think if you go to any rural area
so
in the United States, you will find people of the same leaning. But I think that some rural Nebraskan ideals play into it because, like I had mentioned, this idea of you work hard to get yours, and if you're given a leg up, or if you're assisted in any way, you're somehow less. Like, you don't deserve that because you didn't work for it. I think that it feeds into that, but I think that it's not unique to Nebraska. I think it's a rural thing, and I don't know why, but I do think it is a rural thing.
No, so. Would you say the political leaning of your state, or Nebraska clearly, has affected the way your political mind works? Do you think that you're so left because it's so right, or vice versa?
I do think that like my I do have to say calloused because it's, especially after this last election cycle, I just really don't give a shit anymore. Like I will not waver in where I stand. I do think I would be a very different liberal if I had grown. I had mentioned this previously. If I had grown up in a liberal bastion like New York City or L.A. or Seattle or Portland, where like the common denominator is left leaning, I feel like I would be a very different liberal. Probably a liberal that me myself currently would despise.
Okay.
not despise, but just be very annoyed with.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's it's encouraged critical thought, because constant criticism encourages critical thought, and that's where I'm at. Is I have always had to come to the table ready to answer and ready to defend myself, and I can.
So do you think as a left-wing man, being in a red state has actually made you better at thinking about left-wing politics?
Completely.
Yeah, okay.
Completely.
Okay.
Like, I do not know if, as myself, I could ever live in Portland, Seattle, LA, Boston, New York, Chicago. Like, I don't know if I could ever, to be completely honest.
That's very interesting. Now, this is maybe a bit of a detraction, but in what ways, if any, do you think the climate and geography of Nebraska have influenced your opinions and experience within the state? Do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, like I said, it's fucking cold here. Like, it gets cold here. There are colder places, no doubt, but it gets fucking cold here. And again, I don't know if this is unique to Nebraska, but what people say about Nebraska is, and you even heard it coming over, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes and it'll be different.
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes is an exaggeration, but if you legitimately wait 2 hours, the weather will be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it shifts constantly. And I do think that and the flatness and how big the sky is out here, like, and the clouds, like, this part of the state is unique in that it's just so fucking flat and empty.
So, but the emptiness to you, is the emptiness barren and desolate, or is the emptiness sort of beautiful? How would you, do you think it's a good or bad thing to, when you look out and you see for miles, how does it strike you?
It's not bad. It's not desolate. It's just empty. Like, I don't know. There is something beautiful about it. It's surreal.
Mm-hmm.
Would probably, like, just, I mean, wherever I move, I am not going to be able to drive 15 minutes out of town, turn the car off and get out and look up and just see the entire fucking sky. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, actually, that's not true. I mean, there are much more empty parts of the country, but, like, that's something that I've appreciated about growing up here, is that fact. Like, if it just takes 15, 20 minutes and I can be seemingly in untouched land, you know?
Empty.
It's not untouched because it's a field that's being worked by a farmer.
But there's no one there.
But there's no one there.
As far as
I'm by myself.
Mm-hmm. Which is so interesting to me. So, when you grew up, what did they teach you, like, about Nebraska history and about Nebraska as a state? Did they teach you much about that at school?
Yeah, I mean, it's required. I believe 4th grade you have to take Nebraska history in this state. And,
What did they teach you?
They talked a bit about the Native Americans that lived here prior to the arrival of Europeans and people of European descent. Lewis and Clark, a massive amount of time spent talking about Lewis and Clark, even though they spent they spent some time here, but not a whole hell of a lot.
Really.
Yeah, so a lot of time talking about Lewis and Clark, and then pioneers and the Homestead Act.
And has that, as you were growing up, knowing these things, has that shaped your understanding in the state compared to what you actually saw when you were here as a contemporary man? That history, has it affected the way you think about the state, or?
It really solidified, like, that's the thing, is, like, the Homestead Act really solidifies that this has been and will be an agrarian state.
Mhm.
Like this is an ag state. This is about farms. This is about ranchers. This is about, and to date it is.
Yes.
Like it's like there are there are many other industries like Omaha. You can't really say that the city of Omaha is based in ag, even though there are major parts of it are the shipping of products and whatnot and logistics and all that stuff. But it's an ag state.
Yeah.
Like,
So, again, to change it, how has the state, or has the state at all changed since as you as a grown man, or not even as a grown man, just while you've lived here, has the state changed? Do you feel you can see any change in it?
Yes. Like I said, I was here, I was alive, and like within the political sphere when Ricketts came in, and Ricketts was a part of like this Rick Scott neocon like bullshit that came in. Like I think it was it Rick Scott, Wisconsin, whoever the governor of Wisconsin is, just vehemently anti-union, very conservative, all about privatization. Like I said, he's following the conservative playbook, which has been bought and paid for by moneyed interests,
Yeah.
and people are going along with it, and we'll see how it goes, because again, it's going to be really hard to unseat an incumbent Republican in this state because he's got that fucking R next to his name on the ballot. But I think there are enough people upset with how he has decided to run this state. My mother had to leave her job at Health and Human Services because he was making cuts. Like, it was either she leaves her job now or she waits 2 years to lose her job. Like,
Because of the cuts.
because of the cuts. So, and that's not even, this is Health and Human Services.
Yeah, which is a government thing, isn't it?
Yeah, this is helping people with mental disabilities and who cannot physically work. Like, it's like, this type of shit does not go unanswered. And there are plenty of people who are upset and also happen to be able to vote. So
do you think there is a chance? I mean, it's a very red state and it always has been. Do you think there's ever a chance of it not being so?
I do think so. We'll see. It's a very odd moment right now. And we're in a transitional period. Obviously, and this is going to sound morbid, but the more hardened Republicans that die off, the better off the state is going to be. And that, like I said, that's very morbid, but that's really what I have to say, because my generation, the generation that immediately followed before mine, are all fairly liberal leaning, and
particularly yours.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I do see, and even then, that's not just Nebraska. That's overall. I generally see a positive future. It's just there's going to be a lot of shit to clean up.
Okay, so do you think, if we're talking about state by state, do you think there's anything that's particularly different about Nebraska than any other state? And I know between now and we've talked about Nebraska, you always sort of lump it in as like a Midwest state.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something that's anything that like Nebraska is Nebraska versus anything else, or do you really think it is really a middle of the sort of lumped in with the Midwest states?
As far as completely unique to Nebraska, I love the Platte River, but even then the Platte River doesn't really entirely belong to Nebraska because it originates in Colorado.
Okay.
But most of it exists in Nebraska. I really love that. The Nebraska State Capitol is phenomenal. I do love, like, the Capitol building is amazing. WPA project, by the way, that was FDR.
So I was going to say, is it sort of points of pride of Nebraska that the capital would be one of yours.
Yeah, state capital. Halsey, Halsey National Forest, which is also a WPA project. It's a completely man-made forest, like
That's cool.
completely planted by hand. I've mentioned them, but the crane migration is a point of pride when I think about Nebraska.
When you think about, so it's particularly when you talk about the political leaning of the state, and when you find out that Nebraska is the first state that acknowledged that Native Americans were people.
Yeah.
How do you think that compares to the national thing, and do you think that holds true to this day in the state? Because the ruling was here, but does that mean that the state holds that true? Like the individuals, not necessarily the state, but the individuals would hold that true in terms of racial xenophobia, I guess we would call it, rather than racism.
See, here's the thing. In Nebraska, like, if there's no language barrier, there's not going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you have a 55-year-old Nebraska man interacting with a Hispanic male, or anyone who's Hispanic, who cannot speak English, there's going to be a problem.
Okay.
Or beyond that, we have Sudanese and Somali and people from Chad that like are refugees here.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know English.
Broken English at best.
At best, and there's going to be a problem. They're the problem as far as the Nebraskan is concerned. Like they're kind, welcoming, generous people as long as they can talk to you. And there's no like I hate to paint with a broad brush, but that's just what I've seen. I see it at work. I've seen it growing up. It's just them. Like
us and them. So
yeah.
It's an other attitude.
Yeah. And seeing billboards in Spanish really irritates a lot of people around here. Having Spanish radio.
Well, so as a member that works in a bank in Hastings.
Yeah.
And obviously at a bank, you'd think you'd have, especially in Hastings, you'd have a lot of Hispanic customers.
Yeah. More than half.
So do they print things in Spanish?
Completely.
And is that a problem to people that aren't Spanish? Of Hispanic value?
By and large, no, but every now and again you get someone who's very vocal about it, which makes me wonder if there's not more who are just not vocal about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
okay, I see.
Like, I have to imagine, just because growing up in high school, I would hear it. Just, people would get something, and the backside of it's in Spanish. It's just like, why the fuck is this in Spanish? And, the obvious reasonable response is, maybe for people who speak and read Spanish.
Yep.
But to them, why the fuck does this need to be in Spanish?
That's it. It's
what
the need.
What like that's and it's it's quick answers to complex questions.
Yes.
And that's if I have to summarize any sort of education campaign by the Conservative Party, it'd be that. But
we'll digress a little bit, but so would you consider there to be a sort of a brain drain here, that people leave this state in order to pursue higher education, but then they don't intend to come back, or then maybe they intend to come back and just never do? Do people that pursue education leave and then never come back?
Higher education, after, post-grad, after their bachelor's degree, I'd say you have that issue. Anyone who goes on to graduate school, medical school, law school, what have you, outside of the state of Nebraska, I bet, if I'm not a betting man, but I would bet money that they would not return to this state. But the thing about higher education is most people who I know who went to college in this state, and after college work in this state.
Okay.
I'd say that there's probably an issue with brain drain, but it's, I don't know. I wouldn't say I don't know. Like, the best examples I can think of, a good friend from elementary and high school, Connor, he got his degree in meteorology at UNL, and he works for the National Weather Service in El Paso now.
Okay.
Which is obviously,
Outstanding.
that would be considered brain drain. The thing is, that kid, if he could work here, if he could work at the Hastings station or anywhere near here, he would. He's enjoying himself, but he's away, you know?
So do you think maybe there's a lack of opportunity for kids who have gone through a higher education to get those vocations here?
I would say that, yeah.
It's not so much that they can't get their education, it's that they can't pursue it here.
Yeah. They can get their education here, it's just what do you do with that after you get it? You know?
Yeah. So there's a lack of higher occupations.
Yeah. I would say that's one of the bigger issues. Yeah.
Which is fantastic. But do you see the future, so politically, and again this is a digression, but so do you think the future of this state politically, and we've talked about this a little bit, can be changed, or do you really think it's stuck in its ways in terms of the people here? Do you think it can be changed?
I think it can. I've seen it the other way, and I really think I can see it going back the other way, because right now, like I said, people vote along party lines. And I don't know, like the biggest changing factor is our generation. Like, everyone I grew up, like, the only people I know who can 100% say that they're opposed to the idea of people of the same sex being married are just genuinely assholes. Or they go to church 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Like, by and large, people don't give a fuck. It's the same with, like, legalization of marijuana. Most of our generation really doesn't give a shit and honestly doesn't understand why it's still illegal. Not to say that that's a massive issue, but like these are two of the focal points of the modern Republican Party is weed is evil and gays shouldn't be married. Like that, and they're not going to align themselves with a party where it's a bunch of fucking 70-year-old people telling them this shit. Like, telling them that weed is bad, telling them that gays shouldn't be married, and all this shit. Like, so I think that I can see that changing. It's just, and it's been this way for a long time, I think that the left really has to talk about what they stand for, what they want to do, and how it can relate to middle America. Like, I think that's been the problem with the Democratic Party for the longest time, is that people from the Midwest, they're not thinking about me.
Is that what you think the Democrats have a trouble relating to what we would consider middle America or the Midwest?
Yeah.
Do people from the Midwest consider the Democrats to be only working for the coasts and the metropolitan centers?
Completely.
Yeah.
Even though the Republicans are too, but regardless, like it shows. It fucking shows. Do you know who never had a rally here?
Who?
Hillary Clinton.
Okay.
You know who did?
Who?
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders had an Omaha rally.
And how did they receive him?
With open fucking arms, man. Like, it just shows that when the left shows an interest in the Midwest, like, comes here and talks about what they can do for the people here, they latch onto it like fucking, like, it just flies to shit, man. Like, they latch onto it. And it's just, and it makes sense. It makes sense that Clinton ignored Nebraska. Like,
She's never going to win it.
she's not going to win it.
Do you think it's more?
In all honesty, Sanders wasn't going to win it. Like, this is Democratic primaries, so it wasn't winning the general election or anything like that. But he came, and the state went for Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
As far as Democratic primaries go,
Yeah.
it's because he fucking came.
He showed an interest.
Yeah.
So do you think that there's a real lack of Democratic interest in the Midwest?
Yeah.
And they should, so Nebraska in particular, they should maybe.
Well, I wouldn't say there's a lack of. I wouldn't say that there's a lack of interest. It's just there's a lack of presence.
Well, when you say
Because-
so, like the governor, Pete Ricketts,
Yeah.
the Democrats run someone against him.
Yeah, I mean every time. Yeah, I mean we
But
ran.
do they
The last
invest-
one was Chuck Hasbrook.
Do they invest a lot in running against him, or for the seats for the Senate and Congress and?
Senate, they always invest hard. This last election cycle, the Dems didn't even run anyone against Adrian Smith in the third. So, like, it was. I voted for myself instead of Adrian Smith. Like. But.
And do you think people take that as do you think when they look at that they think that the Democrats don't care, or do you think that's just because the Democrats can't win?
I think it's just hedging their bets.
You've got to win the country rather than win the state.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
I mean, it's a concentration of resources.
Yeah.
You've only got X amount of campaign funds.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you concentrate them? Where do you concentrate you've only got X amount of time to campaign. Where do you do that? You do it in the bits where you know you'll win. I voted for Hillary Clinton, but I may as well have voted for Mickey Mouse because my vote did not matter in this state because it's based on the Electoral College.
Of course, that's completely bleeds into it as well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's many things to say about that.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So we've said we've said before you intend on leaving this state,
Yeah.
and you do intend on going to. Why is it that you want to go to other states? We've talked about what this state has to offer you and why you like it, but what attracts you to other states? Is it you're repelled, or there's something that attracts you?
School.
Okay, necessity then.
Yeah, graduate school. I've looked at both UNL and UNO. They both have programs that I can use, but neither of them really interest me.
Mm-hmm.
Weather.
Mm-hmm.
I want to
Okay.
go. I want to go somewhere warmer. I fucking hate Nebraska winters.
I'm with you.
Goddamn, I just really hate being cold. And just somewhere different. I've been here for 25 years almost. I just need something different.
Mm-hmm. So it's not so much a thing of like you have to get out of here. It's just there's better options elsewhere.
There's better options, and don't get me wrong.
You're not trying to escape anything.
And I would gladly end up back here, like.
That's interesting.
After I get my education, after I live somewhere else for a bit, after I be young, have my fun, if I get a job offer back here that's worth my while, I'd come back. I got a lot of shit here. I got people here. I got family here. I know here. I'd come back here. I just need to leave. For now, I suppose.
So that's very interesting. But do you think so? With that in mind, do you think the state of Nebraska provides enough incentives for young people of your age. I know you don't feel yourself young, but
Yeah.
for people of your age and around your age to stay in the state, because you definitely want to go and do school elsewhere. Do you think there's enough of an incentive to stay within the state? Do you think the state tries hard enough to keep you within?
I don't think the state has young people in mind at all. As far as the interests of this state go, I mean, it's like I said, it's primarily ag state, so most of what the state legislature talks about has to deal with ag. The big issues that are currently being dealt with by the state legislature are appropriations for Planned Parenthood in Nebraska, whether or not to repeal the requirement for motorcyclists to wear helmets, and upping the speed limits on the interstate and highways. None of those really seem to deal with young people. I don't think that the state really considers young people. Yeah, well, they consider young people. They just don't really consider young people's interests. And I honestly, I don't even know what those interests would be apart from jobs and low housing costs.
You think there's a lack of priority, maybe, about young people?
Maybe.
Do you even think the state should consider young people when they're thinking of their legislature? Do you think they should concern about keeping young people here? Do you think it's enough of an issue that they should be worried about it?
Well, naturally there is, because you don't want you need to keep a youthful economy, because that's the economy that's going to be here in 20 years. But I think that there's a lot of focus on job creation, and the way that they decide to go about job creation is pandering to large corporations to build locations here, which that is one way to go about it. The other way to go about it is just creating a stable state with stable stable utilities, stable functions, like well-run highways, well-run public power, and just well-run services. Like, if you have cities and a state that run efficiently and are done so cheaply because they're done so publicly and publicly managed, it creates an ideal situation for people to start their own businesses, or for people to just stay. And it's just this state has gone the route of just selling every bit of it. And like I said, incentives. Those incentives being, if you move here and build this, you don't have to pay property tax for a decade. Which just fucks over everyone who's going to be here for a decade.
Naturally.
So,
see, my last question, and probably a very, very broad question, but does Nebraska provide a suitable home for the modern American, chasing this sort of American dream, this sort of what we want to be as an American, to enjoy their existence? Is Nebraska a place that any American from any state could come here and live out their existence happily? Does it provide that sort of backdrop?
I think so. I'm not going to get into what the American dream is, because I'm going to be completely honest, I have no fucking clue what that is anymore. But I do think that anyone from anywhere in the United States could come here and live comfortably, because I've seen it. Growing up, numerous people from Colorado, from California, moved here. Because, like I said, people from California, they can sell their home in California and buy 2 houses here.
Yeah.
That's living comfortably.
Yeah.
People from Colorado can move here and live comfortably. Webster, he's from Oregon, Alaska, Montana, came here lived relatively comfortably.
Ever so much.
Like it is. The tagline for the state was the good life state. And I don't know if that's 100% true that it's the good life, but it is a good life. Like, you can live comfortably here. You can scratch out your mark. You can get a house. You can have a family. You can live comfortably. You can retire here. I mean, even Marino, like not Dr. Marino, but Marino that we see. Yeah, he'd never lived here before. Never. And then he retires from the military, looks around. Hastings, Nebraska. Cheap property, small town, picks it. And he's been here for
a long time.
15 years. Just picked it out of the fucking blue.
So it must be attractive then.
Yeah.
Do you think that's just because of property prices?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Property prices, space.
And maybe community. Do you think community plays a part of it?
It does.
Because you don't buy a house without at least checking out the town.
Yeah, and I mean, Hastings, as far as towns go, is a fantastic little town. Especially given all of the demographic, like 20,000 people, South Central Nebraska. I should not be able to be who I am and exist here, and I've managed. So, yeah, I'd say that Nebraska, as it stands, is able to provide a good life to pretty much anyone from anywhere.
That's fantastic. So, thank you, Nathan. I've been Callum Doswell, and it's been Nathan Kosmicki. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
And we're going to call that quits.